Good morning, everybody. You are currently listening to a Tall Girls podcast hosted by a tall girl named India. I hope everyone who is tuning into this episode is doing super fantastic. Today is a special day because I am joined by a special guest, mom, model, and fellow tall girl, Rachel Willingham. Hi, Rachel.
Good morning. How are you?
I am doing super fantastic. How are you doing today?
Great. I'm good.
I know I gave a tiny introduction, but I feel like you could do a better job. Can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, I'm Rachel Willingham. I live outside of Manhattan in New Jersey. I'm a mom of two boys that are 5 and 1. I am, to India's point, I am a model, but I'm also a marketing consultant and a seamstress slash clothing designer in the works
Whoa,
and
I did
a
not know that
lot
one.
of a lot of different things. I always have to be busy, so I have a lot going on. And yes, I am a fellow tall girl. I am just about 6'1". And I have been, I think I was 6 feet by the time I was about 14. So I've always been, yes,
Wait,
I've always been very, very tall.
that is crazy. Since you were 14, so does
Yeah,
that
I
mean
was
that
taller. I remember being taller than my like middle school teachers.
wow.
I was taller than my fifth grade teacher, actually. There's a picture of me with her, and I was taller than her, and she wasn't.
Oh, oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Wait, so then that means that you stopped growing like around 15-ish, 16-ish, or
I was about 6 feet by the time I was a freshman in high school. And I think so. I was on the crew team in college. And when they did kind of like the full like health assessment, measuring everything, weigh-ins and everything, I was 6'1" by then. So if somewhere between 14 and 18, I settled in at 6'1".
oh my gosh, that is kind of cool, actually. And I know you spoke a little bit about growing up and being tall, like how you're taller than your middle school teachers, but I was wondering if, you could just go more in depth into what it was like growing up as a tall girl, the good, the bad, the ugly. I want to know pretty much everything.
Yeah. Well, so I grew up with two older brothers who are both about an inch taller than me. Both my parents are 6 feet tall. So, growing up, it was expected that I would be that tall. And I also grew up in an environment where my dad was former military. He had played a lot of sports. Being tall and being muscular and having a big build was a positive in his mind. So he celebrated that. I think more so than I did, to the point where I was starting to get insecure about how much bigger I was than my peers at a time where he was kind of like, wow, this is so cool. And I think he was seeing like college scholarship dollar signs in his eyes when he was looking
Yep,
at
pretty much.
me. But I think that it's normal for anyone to start developing insecurities around the time they start going to middle school and they start, hearing what what people should be wearing. And we start becoming aware of makeup and trends and celebrities in a way that you weren't when you're, really like a little kid. So I definitely developed a lot of insecurities around middle school with it. And really I would say from about probably 12 until, I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, I struggled a lot with insecurity about being so tall. So it's definitely like an ongoing process and journey to accepting it and learning to really love it.
Yeah, I completely understand you with the whole college athlete thing and like the scholarships because I actually used to play sports as well when I was younger. I used to do basketball, swimming, tennis. I did a lot of sports. So having that athletic build in combination with the fact that I was tall, there were a lot of people, especially parents, who would actually tell me that I was intimidating. And I don't know, saying that to an 11-year-old, we just don't know how to process that.
No, not at all.
Yeah, so I completely understand that part of it. And also, I wanted to ask, what was the one thing? It could be a question, it could be a comment. What was the one thing that was so annoying for you to hear related to you being tall?
Well, I think, there's one thing that's more general that I think that most tall people, I think all tall people, definitely tall women hear all the time, which is when somebody asks, when I was younger, the question was, do you play basketball or volleyball?
Yep.
And, later on in life, it becomes, did you play basketball or volleyball as you get a little older? And I think that is that what annoys me about that question is it puts a lot of expectations on you, and it makes you feel like you almost didn't fulfill some sort of expectation that society places on you if you didn't do
Exactly.
those things, and like
Hmm.
you wasted it in a certain way. Um, and it's funny because that people see height as a positive thing. So when they're asking that, they have no negative intentions. They're not asking you in a way to make you feel ashamed for not having done those things. It's
Yeah,
like, again, it's a celebration in their mind. They just don't know the complicated relationship that we have with our height. And then when it comes to a specific example of something I hated hearing, I remember I was in college, and one night my friends and I went to the store before a night out. I don't know, we were grabbing like makeup or something at the local Walmart. And I was in an aisle separate from my friends. And I'm just walking down the aisle looking for what I'm grabbing. And I hear this woman turn to her husband. And this is, I mean, there was no attempt made to be discreet about this comment. She turns to him and says, "That is the biggest woman I have ever seen in my life." And I looked at her like, she has to be kidding that she's saying this within 6 feet of me. And I
in the
kind of looked at her,
store.
and they were staring at me like I was this like freak show. And and I was so upset. I was so upset. It was like, because, like we like tall and big has two different connotations, especially
Exactly.
like in our society that's so obsessed with like, like skinny will always still be on a pedestal, so like when you
Yeah.
hear that's the biggest woman, you're like, I mean, it was like a gut punch. And I remember coming out to the car where my friends were waiting, and I just remember crying because it was just so, college is like was peak insecurity for me. So because I lived in a sorority with girls who were all like very small, always trading clothes with each other, and I was very much outside of that. So yeah, that was definitely a really, really hard moment.
Number one, I am so sorry that that even happened to you because that is not okay. I mean, I guess it's one thing to be discreet about it, but her just saying that at the top of her lungs in the middle of the store, you don't even know the person. That's horrendous. So
And it's
I
interesting
apologize
because
for her.
I've had conversations about instances like that with other women who are tall. And we all kind of, in those conversations I've had, a common theme seems to be like this entitlement, that people feel like they feel entitled to be allowed to say something about our height. And I think you and I have talked about this before, that height seems to be the thing that people feel like they can comment on. They don't think of it as rude because
Mm-mm.
they see the height as a positive thing. But in that case, I don't know how she possibly saw it as a positive comment that she was making. But yeah, that was tough for sure.
And I know we also spoke about this a little bit before, but in terms of that intimidating factor, even with the woman calling you that's the biggest, saying that you were the biggest woman that she's ever seen, like, were there times where you felt like you were intimidating to other people, and how did you deal with that growing up?
When I was really young, I remember being this is like, it's kind of sad that this is such a core memory, but and I don't know why this is a thing, but in Washington where I grew up outside of Seattle, all the schools had like a square dancing unit in PE, which it's Washington. It's not like it's Texas, right? So I don't know why they still need to do a square dancing unit in PE, but there was square dancing, and you were partnered up. Either you could pick your partner, so all the couples who were dating, sixth grade equivalent of dating, would
Hmm.
couple up. And then for everybody else who didn't get selected, you had to line up by height, and they would match you up with the opposite gender person who was the equivalent, right?
Yeah.
It was so just like shameful to not be chosen. And there were a lot of people who would just kind of couple up and do their thing. That was never a thing for me. I was so much taller than the boys. And like
Mm.
there were always maybe one or two boys that were close to the same height or like the same height as me. But it always felt like I was the default for them, and I was never who got chosen. And that was definitely like, I wanted to be the girl that gets chosen. And so that
Yeah.
was definitely tough to be like, you know, again, like they're stuck with me. And that felt like for most of the guys my age, like I definitely felt intimidating to them too, like towering over these skinny kids who of course are, men or boys mature later than
Yeah.
girls too. So
Yeah.
in all factors, they were much smaller and scrawnier and shorter or whatever. So um, and I think in general, like I've had people say that they thought that I was much more serious than
Hmm.
I am. Like once they get to know me, they're like, "Oh, you're actually kind of a weirdo and kind of really goofy." And that's not at all what we expected just looking at you. So I think there's a certain air of like, again, like intimidation or seriousness that can be expected when somebody is, this height.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. And I've gotten those comments too about how I was scary at first or I was intimidating at first, but once they got to know me, they got to see the real side of me. They actually liked me better after they got to know me than when they first saw me, if that makes sense. But then
Mhm.
again, I grew up in New York City, so I do have a mean face at first. I just grew up with that, so I can't
Yeah.
help that for the most part. Uh, so I think that in combination with the fact that I'm tall maybe has something to do with it. But
Mhm.
it's crazy how people just place certain traits or assume your personality and who you are based off of what you look like, based
Mhm.
off of your appearance, especially the things that you can't control, such as height. Yes, it's known, I guess, that height is related to confidence and success and this and that and the other.
Mhm.
But there's just so many more layers to tall people than just what other people see on the outside. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
I don't think people understand the relationship that we have with ourselves when our height defines how we're seen by the world. Because anytime that you appear a certain way, whether it's your height, your eye color, your skin color, your hair length, whatever it is, anything that you can't change, well, I guess you can change your hair length, but like anything that you can't change about yourself is something that we all have to come to terms with. And that can be easier for others, depending on what it is. Like, and it can be, again, something that can be seen as a positive. You don't know how long it's taken somebody to accept that. So
exactly. Exactly. I agree with that. And going off of that, when we were speaking earlier, I believe last week, you did mention that you were writing a book related to being tall. Can you tell us more about that?
yes, I say I smile because I started it during like peak lockdown pandemic days.
Mhm.
And it's definitely taken a back burner now that life has resumed and I've had
Yeah.
another baby since starting writing it. But yes, I am in the process of writing a book that, in my mind, I like to think of it as the book that I wish I had had when I
Mhm.
was struggling to accept my height. I'm writing it for the girl or woman who has that complicated relationship with her height. And the first thing I did before starting it was to interview many women. I think I did something like 40 or 50 hours of interviews with women who are all tall. Most of them, and when I say tall, I don't have a specific height in mind because I know that like to be tall, some consider 5'8" tall, some consider, you have to be six
Yeah.
feet over to be in that. But for me,
Yeah.
I wrote it for any woman who's been struggling with her height. And, so there are varying degrees within that. And so what I decided to do was to get these stories from women who also identify as really tall and talk to them about, the relationship that they've had with their height, highs and lows. When did they actually start to appreciate it, if at all? And when is the time in your life where you've seen it as a positive thing? And I started also getting like really funny stories from them, which there are always funny stories, especially when it comes to overconfident shorter men. That
Mhm.
tends to be the theme of some of those hysterical anecdotes.
Yep.
But um, no hate to the short kings, but
Yeah.
so the book is kind of broken down into the physical side of it and the mental side of it. So physical being things like, okay, the little inconveniences that we encounter in life based on our height. Like, oh my God, I'm sitting in this airplane seat and my knees are up against the seat in front of me, and the person in front of me has just lowered their seat, and now I have
Literally.
4 hours of this ahead of me. Like that's
Mhm.
the more like outward stuff that's like, ugh, the world is not made for me.
Yeah.
Things like, where do we actually buy pants long enough, right? That it doesn't look like we're wearing high waters or capris, right? Uh,
Mhm.
so those are, again, like the more physical kind of lighthearted elements of what I've written about. Um, really building off of those conversations I had with all the women I interviewed. And then there's also a more, I'd say, more personal, more intimate, more vulnerable side of the book, which is, how do you face the mental and the emotional side of it? So that covers things like our body image, eating disorders, which I know a lot of women my size, myself included, have battled eating disorders, as a pretty direct effect of just really struggling with their size. Um, Things like dating, which obviously is, interesting when you're this height, and the dating
Mhm.
pool of men taller than you is very small. So yeah, so the idea is that it's a part, I won't say memoir because I don't feel like I have a story to tell that's just about me. It's really about, taking all of those stories from the women I spoke with and putting it all in one place and making something that will, my goal is for the girl or woman reading it, by the end of it, she feels less alone with it, and she feels like she has maybe some advice and tips from women who are professional basketball players, professional volleyball players, models, women who did not make a career out of their height. Advice from those women on how to learn to appreciate it, or at least where to turn when you are struggling with it.
For starters, I think it's awesome that you're writing a book about this because you did say one of the main points is just making sure that other tall women feel like they're not alone, because that is, I think, at least in my opinion, the biggest thing about being tall, especially a tall woman. Like, you stick out, you're the odd one out, you're the tallest one in the group, nobody else is taller than you, nobody else is as tall as you. So it can be easy to just feel like, why me? Why am I the only one? But
Right.
with you making this book and even getting stories from other tall women out there that sound like they're doing their best, sound like they're succeeding out here in the world, it
Mm-hmm.
gives that tall girl reading that book hope that,
Yeah.
yes, there are other people out there like me, there are other women out there that are like me, that are still doing their thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if she can do it, if they can all do it, why can't I? So
Yeah.
I think that that is awesome. And I can't wait for that book to come out because
I know. I feel like the pressure's on now that I've had this conversation with you. Now I have to finish it.
yeah, you have
And
to, for
again,
all
like
of us.
it was like, what's my purpose? We all had our big reflection moments of how small and insignificant we were during the pandemic, during lockdown. And I'm like, I'm gonna start a book. And now I'm like, wait a second, now I have real purpose here. I gotta finish this. So My goal is to finish it by the end of this year.
Ooh,
So fingers crossed. And, I'm going to try to go through the traditional publication process.
yeah.
So that's uncharted territory for me too, but
Good luck with that.
I'm excited. Thank you. Thank you.
But hey, you have a supporter here. So also, are these tall women people that you know?
Yes. So these were all women who first I reached out to the women who I know in my life that are close friends of mine that I felt comfortable reaching out to. I have probably, I think it was like 5 or 6 women that I just reached out in like directly to. Um, And then I also posted on Instagram just saying, hey, if anyone has a friend or a sister or a college, roommate, whatever, who is really tall, I would love for you to ask them if they'd be comfortable speaking to me. So I met a lot of women through it. I met a professional volleyball player who lives in Europe. She's American, but she's playing in Copenhagen. Uh,
Ooh.
I spoke with a former basketball player. I spoke with one of my friends' mother-in-laws who is 6'3", never did sports, didn't model. She never really, I would say, used her height,
Mhm.
professionally. And she loves being 6'3", loved it. So it was really cool to hear kind of like um just everybody's individual journey with it. But yeah, it was a very cool way to expand my network of women who I know have some of the same experiences as me. So it was a very bonding experience and even very like cathartic. I actually had more than one woman end up crying during these conversations. Like we were going
Mhm.
deep with insecurity, things we had struggled with. One of them was like, I have never spoken about this. Like I've never had this
Wow.
conversation. So it felt good to know that it was helping somebody process old feelings,
Yeah.
in an environment where they felt safe and like they were understood.
Wow, this is some good stuff. This is some inspiring stuff. And it sounds like you kind of built this tall girl community while you're at it too. So I think that that's super awesome. Like I
It
said
was really cool.
before.
It was definitely the best thing that came out of the pandemic for me.
That's so cool. And then just want to wrap up with one last question since we were talking about the whole intimidation factor and feeling the odd one out and sticking out and stuff like that. What is one piece of advice that you want to give to the tall girls listening right now who feel like they are intimidating and may be afraid to take up space?
Yeah, I think it's it's so hard because everybody's like journey to self-acceptance is so personal and so different that what works for one person may not work for somebody else. But I would say my number one piece of advice is to find the environment. And again, that's going to be different for everybody. Find the environment where you see it as a positive thing. Find the environment where you find yourself sitting taller and standing taller, because that generally means that that's where you feel most comfortable. For me, that's been in the gym. That's been working out. I would say I used it to my advantage in sports. I use it to my advantage, just in working out now. Like I have become a little bit of a gym junkie, and like it's the first time of my life where I see my muscles and my big frame as a positive thing. I love competing with guys in the gym. Like I've started
Period.
getting into like lifting and
As
um,
you should.
enjoy that. But also, there's other environments that don't have to do with sports where it's seen as a positive as well. I know that modeling is a difficult industry in general, and it can be really tricky to enter if you do have insecurities. But it is an environment where being tall is the norm and it's accepted. And I will say that I've had I've done runway, and in runway experiences, sometimes there's castings where they're saying, a designer will say, I will not cast somebody who is not at least 5'10". And you're like,
Oh.
all right, well, I got this. Yeah, just find the environments where you feel best about your height. I think it does really help to have friends that are the same height as you or
Yes, for
close to
sure.
it. So find your people.
Yes.
And yeah, that's really it. Just like find the places where you feel like you can celebrate it.
I definitely agree with that, especially with finding other tall friends. My main friend group, the tallest one, is 5'4". So I'm a good like 6.5 inches taller than her.
But I think every tall woman has a best friend who is like barely 5 feet tall. I would say like one of my very best friends, I think she's 5 feet, 5'1". And we always kind of joke that we're little puzzle pieces where like she kind of fits right in here and I'm up here.
Literally, my high school friend, she had been 4'11" for the longest time in high school. Then one day she came in so happy, and I'm like, oh my God, well, it's good to be happy. But when you're in high school, you're just like, I'm so tired. I'm sitting here like, why are you happy? She's like, I found out that I'm 5 foot. I'm like, what? But I definitely think that every tall girl needs a short best friend or short
Yeah,
best friends. But,
absolutely.
having tall best friends are not that bad either.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But thank you so, so much for
Of
being
course.
here,
Thank you for
Rachel.
having me.
It was so nice to have you here. I need to know, we all need to know, honestly, where can we find you on the interweb to contact you, follow you, hear updates about your book and stuff? Where can we find you?
Well, I'm almost exclusively on Instagram in terms of social media. I will not pretend to be hip enough to use TikTok. And now that I've just said hip, I've totally aged myself out like 32 going on 55. Yeah, on Instagram, Willingham Rach. And that is where I share modeling work and kind of humorous random stuff that happens with our life. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, it's going to be linked below in the description. And I feel like this is the perfect time to plug myself at a Tall Girls podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest. Feel free to hit both of us up. If you have any other questions, if you have any comments, if you have any other stories that you want to share with us, especially with
Yes.
Rachel, that would be great for her
I
book.
want all the stories. So if somebody's listening to this and they're like, I have to tell her this, it can be hysterical, it can be heartbreaking, whatever. I want to talk to you. So it is not too late to get more stories from my book. So if you want to be in this,
Yes, please.
send me a message.
Y'all got till the end of this year. So what are we in? We're in
Yep.
August of 2023. Y'all have till December of 2023. So you need to
Right.
get up on it.
That's
But
right.
once again, thank you so, so much for being here. I really appreciate it. We all really appreciate it. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Good night and goodbye.